Okay, how's everybody out there doing tonight? Let's do a quick comms check, make sure everything's going good. I'm here tonight with you from KRTD Media Live doing Cup of Joe with Joe. How are you doing tonight, Dolores? Appreciate you stopping in, seeing how things are going. Remember, folks, this is krtdmedia.com. You can go to our patreon.com, KRTD Media Group, and sign up to be able to get all of these at the earliest possible opportunity as they come back on. So, with that out of the way, I'd like to go ahead and get started on tonight's news. Let's go ahead and get the big one up here, folks. So, first up, the Freedom Convoy. Now, this is about the anti-vax mandate out of Ottawa, Canada. One of the things we were looking at across the nation as things go on right now, and particularly in Canada, reason why is because they've been willing to do that a little bit more often because of the nature of the way laws and legislation works in Canada. The vax mandate in Canada is affecting all of the truckers. Now, the truckers as a whole decided, whether we're vaxxed or not, the mandate itself is not a good idea. So they've collected hundreds, if not thousands, of truckers from across the state of Canada, and they've all decided to park in Ottawa in protest of the vaccine mandates required for truckers to operate inside of Canada. If you want to be able to drive the big rigs, if you want to be able to deliver the goods, the idea was you got to be vaccinated. You got to be able to prove that you're not transmitting COVID through any of the processes that you're doing in the process of moving all of those goods from point A to point B all across the state, all across the nation of Canada. And this gets particularly problematic because Shane and I have discussed in a previous episode of our news last week, as a matter of fact, not everybody is actually capable of receiving the vaccine. The vaccine mandate in a lot of places has come across as a universal policy with zero exceptions. Employers, if you can't get the vaccine for medical reasons, there is no exception. They will simply fire you. In the case of the truckers, the convoy, everything that's associated with that, several of these individuals, the process of trucking for them is largely no contact. They will never come in contact with the goods they transport. They will never come in contact with anything, in a lot of cases in any way. So the idea of the vaccine mandate, it's a little over the top. Now, the convoy itself has certain problems that have become associated with it. One is there are those who have joined the convoy badly. This is true. White nationalists have come to be associated with at least portions of the convoy simply because they've been extremely outspoken, unlike many of the other convoy members that have participated. This creates a certain aspect that takes away from what it is the convoy organizers themselves are trying to achieve. Don't let the people who join the movement badly affect your overall view of what this organization of labor, and that's what this is. This is a labor organization where they're going out and dictating that if you want the work done, these are the accommodations you must make for those who will do the work. This is a nationwide strike of truckers. They've had some other participation that have shown up. Farmers have driven their tractors from hundreds of miles away in order to join this particular convoy. For those of you who have ever been stuck behind a tractor on a country road, this is moving from point 1 to point 2, point A to point B, you know that was not a speedy journey, not by any stretch of the imagination. So right now, let's go ahead and take a look at what this means for the United States. Okay, the United States right now, since COVID has kicked off, has run into certain issues with regards to supply chain management. We have not been able to get supplies, product to certain stores in certain places across the United States for a number of reasons. Okay, there has been no effective trucks, transportation strike in the United States. That's not one of the reasons why they've been, go ahead and address Brandy's issue here. Allergy to eggs. The carrier serum that they actually use for the virus, contains things in it that affect some people in extremely bad ways. One of the reasons why they cannot get the normal vaccine that is the standard that's going around right now. So this is one of those contraindicative issues that continues to show up for those people who are refusing, the universal mandate. It's like, no, I'm allergic to vaccines. Not me personally. I've been in the United States Army. I've walked the line. I have been injected with nearly every vaccine right up until the day I left in 2013. Only one I've even had a remote adverse reaction to was the anthrax, the weaponized anthrax vaccine that was being given out actually 1998 already. That was an experimental vaccine back in 1998. I received it back in 1998, getting ready to move in. And this was even before the Afghan war. This was before going into Iraq. So we've been working on vaccines for a while. But those people out there are people contraindicative. They should not be taking the vaccine regardless. Yet that is not stopping employers from firing them. Now, the Freedom Convoy, if we were to repeat this in the United States, okay, we would run into the exact same problems that Canada is running into right now. Okay, the exact same problems. They're running into supply chain issues. Their store shelves are empty. Baby formula is not making it to hospitals. Baby formula is not making it to stores. Baby formula is not making it to families in need. What will that ultimately mean with regards to childhood nutrition as you start to take a look at the effect of early childhood development in Canada? Canada knows exactly what this means for a number of reasons I won't go into in this particular episode. Okay, malnutrition in children, it's a big issue. If we were to replicate the Freedom Convoy in the United States to the same degree, particularly when there is no mandate that is legal in the United States, the Supreme Court has come out and said that the mandate is illegal. That doesn't stop certain organizations, certain municipalities, and even some certain states from deciding that, yes, there are things we can mandate as far as the general health and welfare of the people. That is a clause that is in the Constitution of the United States. The government of the United States does have a responsibility for the general welfare of the people. That, however, is an issue of policy and consent, because there is no consent, there is no governance except through consent of the governed. It's the principle of the United States. There is no governance without consent of the governed. Right now, there's a significant number of individuals who do not consent to the vaccine. Said if we were to do the freedom strike here in the United States for whatever reason, and there are people who are looking at that and going, yes, Canada's got it. Why aren't we doing it here in the U.S.? Well, because right now there isn't a nationwide mandate for truckers to get the vaccine to be able to work. How are you doing, Michelle? Glad to see you this evening. Brenda Brandy, one of the things, trouble keeping sharp containers, sterile water, some imported meds in stock. Absolutely, this is one of the things that continues to be an issue with regards to general welfare of the people, making sure that our hospitals and our medical centers are adequately staffed in order to deal with emergencies as they come up. This is one of the problems we've actually run into with for-profit medicine ever since Nixon. Thank you, Nixon. And the just-in-time supply chain has created problems, particularly as certain organizations, especially in for-profit healthcare, have figured out that reducing access to certain kinds of care, certain products, allows them to increase the profit margin on the products they make, on the services they provide. This is going to be one of those big issues that our Red Berets talk about quite a few times, quite often in the future. Got my own issues with it. A slightly different approach, slightly different solution. But again, that is not something for today's discussion. Just know that if, for whatever reason, the transportation labor movement in the United States, if they were to conduct the equivalent, would represent significant impact on the general welfare of people in the United States. So, reminder, as much as some people like to think about this, this is not an end state that we want to allow our legislators to force upon us when it comes to consent of the governed. Okay. Next up, ooh boy, this is a good one. Okay, reason one, we're still dealing with the Ukraine issue, right, folks? Russia still wants to talk to the Ukraine. They want to go in. They want to do a pipeline through the Ukraine. They want a transcontinental road going through the Ukraine. They want to be able to establish that trade route through the Ukraine, not just for Europe, but the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran. It all goes through the Ukraine, which right now the U.S. is involved in. Now, this particular thing is interesting. Reason why is because the U.S. troops are deploying to Eastern Europe, not the Ukraine. Why are we not sending troops directly into the Ukraine? Because the Ukraine said no. Okay? Ukraine said no. So the best thing we can do is stage troops outside of the Ukraine, in Eastern Europe, Germany, Romania, Poland. This is an increase in troop movement. And because these are established allies in Germany, Romania, and Poland, this also authorized the troop movements of National Guardsmen. Yes. It's actually an interesting discussion about Crimea. Reason why is because Crimea was almost entirely ethnically Russian, which is in juxtaposition to what it is you're looking at in the Ukraine. Because ethnic Russians represent only about 18% of the population in the Ukraine, which is completely different than what they had in Crimea. Again, that's also one of the reasons, and I hate to say it, but when the Russians went in and they appointed, God, who was the young woman that they appointed as the prime minister of Crimea when they went in and installed, they nailed it with PR. They announced her as the prime minister, and less than 12 hours later, she was getting fan mail from all over the world. Getting fan mail from the United States, people drawing pictures of her, making anime of her. That's not going to happen in the Ukraine. The thing is, Ukraine, 70 or 82% Ukrainian. Now that's a mix. Reason why is because the Ukraine, that particular region, there are a lot of cultures that are associated with it, in that it's trying tribal lands. It's Eastern Europe, it's northern, Northwest Asia. It's that area where it's been a hodgepodge of things. Yeah, Michelle, that's one of those things. Okay. Keeps them from being landlocked. So why Ukraine too? Uh, reason why is because they want the land transportation and the benefits of being able to run an oil pipeline, because that's really what the goal is with being able to establish the contract, to establish the trade with Ukraine, is to be able to run a pipeline so that they aren't running the oil by train, they aren't running it by tanker across the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea. These are things they want to be able to move the oil faster, to be able to process the oil faster and get it into their refineries. So that's really what this is all about. Again, folks, this is about oil. Okay. Strategic resources, the ability to fuel the automation that drives a developing nation, that drives a first world nation. You need to be able to run the trucks. Remember that convoy that we were just talking about? You need to be able to fuel the generators. You need to be able to keep lights on, running propane. It's all about getting oil into the far reaches of what's going on in Russia so that Russia can continue to develop its economic strength, which, of course, is the issue the United States has with Russia's interest in the Ukraine. Now, mind you, CIA, United States State Department, has been involved in maintaining that friction between the Ukrainians and the Russians, ever since the Berlin Wall went down in '87. Once the United Socialist Soviet Republic, the USSR, fell and fractured, it became balkanized, and all of these little independent countries stood up outside of what was the USSR. There's been a program for what's called the One Russia. Now, this is Putin. Putin's been planning the One Russia. That is the idea to go back and reclaim all of the territories that were lost when the USSR fractured and unite them all under the Russian flag. This has been his platform for, an ungodly number of years now. But this is Putin's platform. Be able to create that economic trade, create that abundance through restoring all of those all of those strategic resources back into Russia. Yeah, and you're right. Manufacturing their own consent. And this is particularly interesting as I get into the next issue here. Go start. This is a good question. What would energy independence from oil and gas do to Russia and European relations? Okay, ironically, it would facilitate a lot because, one, Europe and Russia themselves aren't actually manufacturing the oil. They got to get it from somewhere else for the most part. The United States happens to be one of the largest producers of petroleum-based products in the world right now, one of the largest exporters, no less. Now, the dynamics of being able to have a pipeline that crosses the Ukraine into Russia would change that dynamic significantly, especially since it would be moving Mideast oil, through the Ukraine into Russia and into those refineries. Energy independence. What would it be like if we were actually able to generate safe nuclear power? Ones where we don't have to worry about accidents like Chernobyl or Fukushima, but we were able to take these long-term nuclear projects that were able to power significant, and even if you're looking at other forms of energy, green, whether you're looking at hydropower, whether you're looking at solar, whether or not you're looking at some of these other options that become available as the technology works and we find out more things about, creation of biodiesel, biofuels, being able to turn hemp oil into diesel. These things that create independence from fossil fuels by using renewable resources that can be grown anywhere at any time. It's a good question. And it's one of those we should be looking at more significantly than we currently do. However, let's go ahead and get into this next issue. Give me a moment to breathe, folks, because this one's going to be rough for me. Okay. This, an exclusive interview with Senate Foreign Relations leaders. Okay, in this case, the Senate Foreign Relations leader is one of the senior Republicans. This is Senator James Risch. James Risch has been in the United States Senate since 2009. Okay, that said, Senator James Risch has been a staple in Idaho politics since 1974. Okay. This guy moved from Wisconsin in 1972, 73 with his law degree, then moved straight into politics in the state of Idaho, and he has been ensconced, embedded in our politics here in my state since 1974. 26, 46, damn near 50 years, folks. 50 years. How you doing, Sam? Thanks for dropping in. Okay, now in this particular conversation, this is from CNN. This is somebody who's responsible for foreign relations. He's responsible for developing the relations with foreign nations and determining whether or not we in the United States will be going into some sort of military adventurism in order to preserve a status quo that he's been living under for nearly 50 years. Okay, it's going to cripple their oil production. And as we all know, Russia is simply a gas station that is masquerading, a thinly disguised masquerading, as a country. Yes. You're right. Cruz in Texas. Except Cruz did it recently. He hasn't been installed in, a state's government for 50 years now at this point. Okay, now, this is ironic. Reason why is because James Risch has been a strong supporter of the war in Afghanistan. He's been a strong supporter in the war of Iraq. He's been a strong supporter of military adventurism around the world with regards to the United States. And in this case, it's actually ironic that he chose this particular phrasing, especially considering how often the U.S. has been described as an oil company with an army. Give you guys a few moments to digest that. Yes, the United States, based on the way our current government favors military adventurism and why we choose military adventurism, Senator James Risch is part of that establishment that uses American sons and daughters to bolster U.S. corporate oil interests around the world. And in this case, he didn't actually, he failed to hide it in one of the most amazing ways, incredible. He literally called Russia out for being what he has turned the United States into. An oil company with the strongest military in the world is what we've become here in the United States, and nothing more than puppets, pawns for people like Jim Risch to send around the world in order to acquire more strategic resources for the United States. Honestly. And Senator Jim Risch is actually one of those that's extremely problematic. As you watch an awful lot of what KRTD does, And I've even participated in some of these conversations about dump the incumbents. What does dump the incumbent mean? How is it we go about getting rid of these sort of crony senators, crony congressmen who continue to support the military industrial complex, who continue to support big oil across the United States? Senator Jim Risch has just stepped out and literally admitted on CNN that this is his goal. Continue to maintain the status quo of the United States as an oil company with an army. Competing for market share against Russia. Back to dump the incumbents. Senator Jim Risch is particularly problematic. Reason why is because he won re-election 2 years ago. Well, 18 months ago. He was up for re-election. His war chest managed to get him re-elected. As a result, Senator Jim Risch stands an extremely good chance of retaining his seat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for yet 4 more years. This is the kind of thinking we've been trying to get away from in our government, get away from in our Congress. Working on an evolution towards peace. And here we have, someone who's been involved in the United States government for nearly 50 years now, with a goal of military adventurism in perpetuity to preserve corporate interests globally. It's 4 years before you can dump this incumbent, folks. 4 more years. Pay attention to what's going on, because he's going to continue to make statements like this over the next 4 years. And like I said, he's been in politics for nearly 50. By the time he's out, he will have been in politics for over 50 years, regardless of how long he's been sitting in Washington. Okay, next up, Whoopi Goldberg. This one's a particular interest. Reason why is Whoopi Goldberg, longtime host of The View. How many of you are familiar with format of The View? You got 5, women, established, middle-aged women who are talking about issues. This is the kitchen sink. This is what's going on in the world. Now, Whoopi Goldberg last week made a comment. And I'm not sure whether or not this was, what? It's interesting because 6 days ago was Holocaust Remembrance. How many remembers? Yeah. How many remembers 6 days ago? Holocaust Remembrance, January 27th. We're talking about the attempted genocide of the European Jews. 6 million died in the process. And so Whoopi Goldberg made a comment. And this wasn't actually in concert with the Holocaust Remembrance, as some of us may want to think. This was more in discussion about what was going on with the Tennessee book ban, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But Whoopi Goldberg has currently been suspended from The View for 2 weeks because of a comment. It's a good one, Ghost Start. I'll have to come back to this one. U.S. World's Jed Clampett. There's Earl in them there hills. Yes, there is. Okay, now Whoopi Goldberg. Well, honestly, Kay, that's most of us. That is most of us. Now, the thing about Whoopi's comments was she said it's not about race. It's about man's inhumanity to their fellow man. Now, since she made that statement on The View, she has come back and since apologized, saying, yes, it was about race as much as it was about man's inhumanity towards their fellow man. Now, Whoopi Goldberg comes from the perspective of an underserved community within the United States. She looks at things through a significantly different lens than several of her other hosts. She's made similar comments that other people have thought weren't really appropriate. Who remembers the discussion where she came out in defense of Vic for his dogfighting arrest? It's about the culture. It's about the culture. Or in Vic's case, the subculture in which it was the toxic masculinity in which he was raised in, where dogfighting was acceptable, even though it was illegal. Ray Vic, he ended up going to, ended up with a couple issues, but these are the things, where Whoopi comes in from a different perspective. And it's sort of funny as you watch the Twitter feed go on, and it's like, here you have the woke left out there going, she said something bad about the Jews, so we got to cancel her. But she's a black woman in the United States. Okay. Whoopi knows where the confusion, what it was she was trying to say happened. She has come out and apologized. And as we all know, yes, it was most definitively about ethnic cleansing. It was an attempted genocide, and the Jews were specifically singled out for genocide. Yeah, Ghost Start. I'm going to have to let that one sit, man. I'm going to have to let that one sit. Especially as we're moving into Black History Month. You brought it up. This is one of those things. Holocaust Remembrance, 3 days before we move into Black History Month, where we start talking about Black history in the United States and what that represents as far as the transatlantic slave trade. You start talking about the history, the legalists, the legislation, and okay. This is actually extremely ironic. Reason why is because we recently had a bill introduced in the Idaho State Legislature. We have a senator, Senator Wintrow. She introduced a bill into committee. You know what the bill was? The bill was to allow a landowner, free of charge, to go into the county clerk and have the clause stricken from a deed that said the property could only be sold to white folk. (2022), folks, 2022. Idaho is finally getting around to making it free to remove a clause that land could only be sold, that plots of land could only be sold to white folk. No kidding. So that's one of the things that we're looking at as far as relations between certain demographics. When it comes to ethnic cleansing, when it comes to ethnic priorities, when it comes to treating people differently because of a specific ethnicity, because of their nation of origin, because of a particular heritage, because of the degree of melanin in their skin. It's 2022 and we're still dealing with these issues. And when we look back at Holocaust remembrance, when we look back and we compare it to issues that are currently going on, First Nations in Canada are still dealing with fallout from the residential schools. The understanding that the graves they found were in no way an indication of the depravity of the members of the churches that oversaw those residential schools. As So from an American perspective, stepping back and taking a look at global genocides, global democides, where we have gone in to attempt and systematically eliminate specific ethnicities around the world, specific ethnicities on the land we live in. The Holocaust absolutely was about ethnic cleansing, as was every attempted genocide on the planet. Man's inhumanity to their fellow man. It's time to get over it, folks. We live in a world that's capable of being so much better, is being capable of being so much more. Yeah, I'm going to have to leave Mark Hornsby alone on that one too, Go Start. We're still seeing those issues show up. Here it is, 2018, 2019, 2022, and we are still seeing the way that race still shows up in our legal system, the way that race still shows up in our policy, the way that race still determines the actions of our government in all the branches, whether it's the legislative, whether it's the executive, whether it's the judicial. We still continue to see how race plays out in each one of those three branches. Continues on and on. Race abolition. Okay. It's ultimately our goal as humans. There is only one race. It is the human race. You have significant ethnicities, significant cultures around the world. We should endeavor, we should evolve beyond the hate, beyond the fear of the others that continues to want people to seek the destruction of others over insignificant differences. Okay. Now for the topic in which Whoopi actually got into trouble. This was Mouse. Okay, Mouse, Tennessee school bans Mouse from the curriculum. And there's a couple different takes on the way and what actually happened. Whether it was banned from the library, whether it was banned from the school, whether it was just banned from a curriculum, whether or not the school board decided, take it out of the library, just take it out of the curriculum. Just don't teach it to the 8th graders because it's a graphic novel and it has nudity, it has violence, it has the lives of the Jewish people during the Holocaust memorialized in graphic novel format. These are the same stories, the same experiences as the Diary of Anne Frank. Her time watching from a window. An ironic situation here in Boise, the only place in the United States where there is an Anne Frank memorial. Boise of all places. I'm going to go ahead and talk this up. Racecraft, the crafting of race. It's actually anti-cultural work done to divide the people into arbitrary categories. Okay, race is a social construct. It does not exist. It's one of the reasons why so many people involved in civil rights actions, the actionists, are race abolitionists. It's about eliminating the concept of race as a divisive factor, as a term for policy, as a term for legislation. Okay. And once you've established that, it's the process of dehumanization. How do we dehumanize the others? How do we make them different enough from us so that we can justify the commission of atrocities? They are our brothers and sisters. We exist. We share blood. We share a heritage. Yes, we share a heritage. Science has tracked it back to a genetic Eve, to a genetic Adam through mitochondrial and the matriarchal, the Y chromosomes and the X's. We have, all humans on the planet have a common ancestor. So why do we go about killing each other when we are indeed all brothers and sisters in all things, in all ways? Our differences are minor. You see more genetic difference between tribes of chimpanzees than you do from one human compared to any other. But it's the process of the otherizing, making people bad, the enemy, the dehumanization process, the thing that says, you are not one of us, you do not belong. Maus is the story of the Jews during the Weimar Republic. This was in the early, just before we went into World War II, and we were looking at the global issues that were continuing to go on. The ironic thing is as much as we talk about what happened in Germany, what we talked about was going on with the Holocaust. Race implies competition, which leads to discrimination. It's a good point. It's a good point. We're a cooperative race. The human race is a cooperative race. We are about culture. We are about society. We are about cooperation. Interdependence, not codependence, but interdependence is what allows us all to become greater, allows us to create specialization, which gives us economy of time so that we have more luxury time to create things and become enlightened as a race in such a way that we gain knowledge, we gain the knowledge now, the knowing of now, that allows us to look past the moment and into the future to create and achieve greater things for all of us. And to this date, the United States has spent the last 20 years bombing people who live in tents for no other reason than to make a bomb maker money. Let's go back to Jim Risch. Okay, now, from that perspective, mouse. What it means. Let's see what I got here. Okay. With regards to relations between the different cultures, different subcultures in the United States, as we look at what goes on across the United States, 1950s, the United States was not a good time. The United States during this era, when the story of Mouse was written about, when the graphic art was created about, we were still very much involved in the exact same sins against a different culture here in the United States. We like to look past that because we had somebody else who was doing it. They were doing it, and that made them bad. Because they were doing it, nobody was looking at what we were doing. Okay, mind you, this flag behind me, I believe in it because it represents the people. It represents the Americas. It represents hope in the white. It represents blood shed by people who fought for freedom, the blood of patriots. You know, the star is one star for each nation. This represents a people. It represents a culture that has become warped by our government, that has become warped by the oligarchs. We can do better, folks. We need to be doing better as a people. That's what part of evolving beyond the otherness that created stories like Mouse, created stories like Anne Frank's diary, that created stories about the Trail of Tears here in the United States, or about the Japanese internment camps, in the 1950s, about the transatlantic slave trade, about the rebellions of the slaves that were popped up and were put down. We need to work on developing and getting past this sense of competition. We are cooperative. We are a species of cooperation. Let's go ahead and cover some of the other issues that have popped up. Like I said, Michelle. Mukilteo, Washington, banned to kill a mockingbird. Okay. Book burning in the United States, regardless of how you look at it, if you need to resort to burning a book, it means it represents something you are scared of people finding out about, particularly your children. Okay. Every one of these stories represents a history. They represent a capacity for what authors in the past saw as potential futures. Whether you're looking at 1984, whether you're looking at Soylent Green, whether you're looking at The Handmaid's Tale, one of the more recent ones of a dystopian America. If you are looking at banning those books because you are afraid of the future that those stories are telling about, it's probably a good indication that that future is a lot closer than objects in the mirror may appear. Brandy, yep. Bombing families in Afghanistan. It's a big problem. Bombing families in Yemen. Matter of fact, Ghost Star, what was it you brought up earlier where we were talking about Saudi Arabia? They're dropping bombs in Yemen tonight. This is U.S. participation in military adventurism that is contributing to an ethnic cleansing in Yemen. This is a genocide. This is a democide that is being facilitated by U.S. resources. The United States continues to sell the Saudis arms, continues to sell them munitions, continues to sell them bombs. And what do they use them for? Killing and starving Yemenis. Not only are they dropping bombs, there are also sanctions against Yemen. So, remember those children we were talking about that were starving in Canada because truckers stopped moving baby formula? Yemen has been dealing with that for 3 years now. All because the U.S. supports our allies in Saudi Arabia. Let's take a look at what else we got. Locally, we're still dealing with the homeless in LA. Oh man, can you imagine trying to get all of the homeless relocated from around the Super Bowl Coliseum in LA? Not exactly easy, especially in the market for housing down there in LA. There's an awful lot of working homeless. Awful lot of working homeless that are living in their cars that are probably parked in that parking lot. It's going to be interesting when they kick the employees for the Coliseum that are living in their cars out of the parking lot, place where they go to work. It's going to be interesting seeing that, man. It really is. United States, we still got kids in cages. How long have we been dealing with that now? Okay, keep in mind that issue with the border control goes clear back to Reagan. We were talking about border issues, immigration in the United States, clear back to Reagan. And this is when all of this started. It's around Reagan when we started locking down what was going on with immigration, when we started restricting agricultural visas, other work visas, unless a corporation wanted to be able to import cheap labor, except in the case of agriculture. Agriculture, they figured it was cheaper to go ahead and bring them illegally. And when they didn't want to pay them, they would just call ICE and send them back to whichever country they originated from. But we still have kids in cages. The reason why is because those kids aren't able to survive in the nations they were born in because of U.S. foreign policy and because of climate change. It doesn't matter whether you believe it's man-made or whether you believe it's natural. The point is climate change happened, and it turned a lot of those areas where they lived into deserts. And when a people can't eat because what used to be their farmland is now barren, they go looking for places where they can grow food. Right now, we can still grow it in the United States. We can still grow it everywhere in the United States. They come here because they, one, seek escape from our foreign policy. Two, we are still a land of opportunity, regardless of what our government tries to make us into. We still have work here. We still have the ability to create. We still have the ability to produce. We still have the ability to become greater than we are. We still have the ability to stand up from an entrepreneurial mindset and create greatness in the communities in which we live, regardless of how much labor gets exported out of the country for corporate profits. Homeless, yeah, homeless everywhere continues to be a problem. The market for housing in the United States, complete with inflation, everything else that's going on in the labor market, we continue to see issues with homeless development. It builds and it continues to build. Now, depending on how you look at what's going on with the homeless market and who's actually purchasing, reason why is because the trend for home ownership is, ironically, more homes are being bought by corporate interests than they are by homeowners, by residents. That one's actually a long conversation, Michelle, and because of the time tonight, I don't actually have the ability to go into it too deep. But one of the things is farmers don't actually hate socialism. What they hate is being told what they should do with their own land. Ironically, capitalism does that even more than socialism does. The reason why they're so scared of socialism is because every instance in which an active socialist/communist government has gone into an area in which farmers have owned land, the farmers have almost always been displaced and replaced by urbanites. Whether you're talking about China, whether you're talking, Mao in China, whether you're talking about Lenin in Russia, whether or not you're talking about certain other communities around the world, Brazil. When a socialist government goes in and they decide it's time to feed the people, the first thing they do is they take the land from the farmers. And then everybody starves. Which is an interesting topic. But yes, one of the problems that we're looking at right now with regards to farmers and the payments that they take. Okay, fewer and fewer of the family farms are actually able to take advantage of those government payments that we talk about. Reason why is because corporate farms, they're the ones who pay the accountants to go looking for those programs, those benefits that get the payouts, that in turn, so you are looking at corporate farms with people who get paid six figures to go and look for these government handouts to subsidize their land and go through the process of gaming the Department of Agriculture in order to maximize profits. That combination of labor that they don't have to pay because they're allowed to let the land go fallow, and they're getting compensated for letting the land go fallow because it's not providing competition for the rest of the market. It's a confusing issue, and it requires professionals to go in and figure that out. And yes, U.S. has its nose in too many countries. Go start. Let's take a look at that. Hadn't thought about the working homeless. Yeah, we don't, which is a problem. You know, we think of homeless as homeless, no job, no car, no place, no possessions. We don't even realize how many homeless people in America are actually homeless families with children, young children, infants. Housing insecurity has become one of the biggest crises globally at the moment, but particularly here in the United States because of everything that's become associated with inflation, COVID, the ability of people to go out and actually get to work. So we're looking at, okay, yes. Go Star, thanks for coming in tonight and joining me for the chat. I got to be rolling on here soon because I got other things to talk about with other people about other issues. One of which happens to be medical marijuana. I'm going to go into a meeting right after this. Let's see. Allotments bankrupted many family farms when it was gutted. Out here in Idaho, good point. More than a few urban politicians collect obscure farm subsidies. Okay, yeah, you own 10 acres in a rural community in which you now live, but you have never touched a tractor. You have never ridden a plow. And somehow that 10 acres that you let go fallow permanently, somebody has found you a way to collect a benefit from doing nothing more than manicuring your lawn. We got too many urban politicians that are collecting those subsidies. They're intended for farm subsidies. They live off of those while sitting in Capitol Hill talking about who should get subsidies. Yes, crooked. Definitely need to clean that issue up. And yes, occupy vacant housing. Go ahead. Absentee property management rights. It's an interesting concept, particularly in libertarian circles. Reason why is because absentee land ownership. If you're not using it, are you actually entitled to it? It's a huge discussion. Big issue. Okay, love you guys. Remember, go to our KRTD Media group on Patreon. Subscribe there. Go to our Facebook page. Subscribe. Go to our website, krtdmedia.com. Pay attention to what's going on. Get in tune. Volunteer. Donate. Keep the money coming. That allows us to keep maintaining conversations like this with you, the people, so that we have these discussions about the things that are important, not just to us, but to you. Remember that, folks. Pay attention to what's going on. Love you. Family, friends, community. As long as you got those three, you can make anything happen. Peace.